Hello, and welcome to Real Fear Files. Tonight, we're leaving the comfort of city lights behind. No neighbors, no cell signal, no help coming. Just trees, endless trees. In this episode, you'll hear 9 disturbing accounts from people who entered America's wilderness expecting peace and found something else waiting for them. Something that doesn't follow rules. Something that doesn't like being watched. These aren't urban legends or campfire stories designed to scare kids. They're real experiences, gathered from first-hand testimonies, ranger incident logs, and official reports that were never meant for the public. Stories of hikers who followed lights that shouldn't exist, voices calling from places no human could reach, and presences that don't attack right away. They observe, they follow, they wait. To protect those who survived, names and identifying details have been altered. But what happened to them? The fear, the confusion, the silence remains exactly as it was. Because out there, far from civilization, being alone doesn't mean being safe. If you're new here, subscribe to Real Fear Files for true horror stories pulled from the darkest corners of reality. And turn on notifications, because once you hear these stories, you may never look at the woods the same way again. Now, let's begin. You've heard the saying, never go into the woods alone, right? Well, imagine this. You're hiking deep in a forest where the sun barely touches the ground. The air is thick, damp, and smells of wet earth and decaying leaves. Birds are silent. Even the wind seems to be holding its breath. That's where our story begins, deep in the woods, far from help, with nothing but your own footsteps to keep you company. Except in these woods, footsteps aren't always your own. It was late October when Emma decided to go camping with her friends. She had always loved the outdoors, fresh air, the crackle of fire, the smell of pine needles underfoot. But this time, something about the forest felt different. Shadows stretched longer than they should have, trees bent as if whispering secrets to one another. She shrugged it off, blaming the early dusk, the chill in the air. Her friends joked about ghost stories, about the guy who vanished in these woods decades ago. Emma laughed along, but there was a hitch in her laugh, a little quiver she didn't notice. They set up camp near a small clearing. A fire was lit, marshmallows roasted, and stories began to flow. One of her friends, Mark, leaned in with a smirk. "You guys ever hear about the Lantern Man?" he asked. Emma tilted her head. Mark's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "People say he wanders these woods at night. If he sees you, well, you just disappear." The others laughed, tossing more logs into the flames, but Emma felt a chill creep along her spine. It was just a story, she told herself. Just a story. Night fell, faster than expected. The fire's glow barely reached the edges of the clearing. Sounds of nocturnal creatures began, a hoot of an owl, the rustle of something moving through leaves. Emma zipped her jacket tighter, feeling the forest closing in. Her friends were already inside their tents, the orange light of the fire flickering against the trees. She decided to take a short walk before bed, just a quick stroll to stretch her legs, she thought. The forest greeted her with silence. Every step she took seemed amplified. The crunch of leaves underfoot echoed unnaturally. She stopped, listening. Nothing. Just her breathing and the faint rustle of wind. Then she saw it. A faint glow between the trees. A lantern. But no one should be here. She froze. The lantern swayed slightly, like it was moving toward her, but no one was visible. Her heart thumped loudly in her chest. She called out, her voice trembling. "Hello?" No answer. Just the glow, inching closer. Panic prickled her skin. Should she run? Or was this someone lost like her? The glow stopped, then vanished. Emma blinked. Her rational mind screamed, "It's just someone's flashlight." But deep down she knew this was different. Emma turned to go back to camp, and then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, behind her. She spun around. Nothing. Just the dense trees, the fog beginning to curl low around the roots. She started walking faster. The footsteps quickened, but never quite matching her pace. Her pulse raced. She tried calling her friends, but the forest swallowed her words. Every branch seemed like a finger pointing at her. Every shadow seemed alive, and then she saw him. A figure, pale, almost translucent, standing just at the edge of the trees. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. And yet, she felt him. Watching. Emma froze, stomach knotting. He lifted the lantern. Its light was dim, sickly, casting grotesque shadows across his face. She couldn't see details, but somehow she knew. This wasn't human. Not anymore. Her legs refused to obey. She stumbled backward. The figure tilted his head, a slow, deliberate motion, like a predator savoring its prey. Emma turned and ran. Branches clawed at her arms and face, roots snagged her boots, and the forest seemed to stretch endlessly. Behind her, a faint shuffling, then a whisper. She couldn't understand the words, but they were everywhere. Inside her ears, inside her mind. Her lungs burned, her heart threatened to burst. And yet, the whisper followed. "You shouldn't be here," it said, soft but chilling, carrying an impossible weight. She tripped, collapsed into a bed of wet leaves. Her hands scraped the ground. She glanced back. The figure was closer, not running, just gliding. The lantern swayed, casting long, unnatural shadows that twisted like black smoke. Emma screamed, a raw, primal sound, but the forest absorbed it. She tried to crawl, tried to reach the clearing, but it felt miles away. Her friends' laughter and voices from earlier were gone. Everything was swallowed by the night. Hours, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning. She scrambled over roots and fallen logs. The forest seemed endless. And then she found it. A cabin. Small, decrepit, hidden among the trees, like it had grown out of the forest itself. Light flickered inside, faint but warm. Desperate, she ran to the door, pounding, screaming. No response. It opened easily. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay, mold, and something fouler she couldn't name. Dust coated every surface. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling. It felt like stepping into a frozen moment of horror, a place abandoned for decades but somehow alive. Emma's eyes adjusted. In the corner, she saw photographs. Family portraits, old, faded. And in each one, the same figure. Lantern in hand, same pale, motionless face. Watching. She realized with a sick twist in her stomach, this cabin was his home. Or maybe his trap. The lantern flickered as if sensing her presence. She stepped back. A floorboard creaked. Her breath caught. Something moved behind her. Slowly, deliberately, a shadow stretched across the wall. She bolted out the door. The forest swallowed her again. Behind her, the whispers became laughter, cold, empty, mocking. She ran blindly, branches tearing at her skin. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. Every instinct screamed to escape, to survive. Eventually, she burst into the clearing. The fire was gone. The tents collapsed. Her friends nowhere to be seen. Panic turned to despair. Had she imagined it? No. The footprints were there, deep, unnatural impressions in the dirt. And the lantern? Flickering on the edge of the tree line, swaying gently, as if waiting for her. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing near the edge of a dirt road. Dawn was breaking. Mist curled over the forest like a thin veil. She looked back once, and the lantern was gone. The forest was silent again, but she knew. He hadn't left. He was waiting, always watching, always patient. Emma never went back into those woods, and to this day she refuses to speak of what happened. But sometimes, at night, she swears she can hear whispers in the wind, soft and cold, carrying a single chilling warning. Don't wander where you shouldn't be. Some say he's just a legend, a story parents tell their kids to keep them safe. But Emma knows better. He's real, and he's waiting. Always waiting. It started with a knock. Soft, deliberate, like someone tapping a fingernail against glass. But no one was there. At least, not at first glance. Emma, or rather, let's call our new protagonist Mia, had just moved into her first apartment, a small studio on the edge of town. It was old, a little musty, but cheap. Perfect for someone starting fresh, ready to leave her past behind. Or so she thought. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that fills your ears until even your own heartbeat sounds like a drum in an empty stadium. Mia unpacked boxes, humming to herself, trying to ignore the strange sensation that she was not alone. She chalked it up to stress. Moving was exhausting. That must be it. Then she heard it again. The knock. This time, a little louder. She froze, heart thudding. She called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" Nothing. The apartment was empty. The street outside was dark, silent. Just the hum of the old refrigerator. Mia shook her head, telling herself she was imagining things. Old buildings creaked. Floorboards groaned. Shadows shifted in ways that didn't make sense. It was just the apartment settling. Nothing more. She went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. Every little sound made her jump. The wind rattling the window, the pipes groaning. And then she felt it. A presence. Something cold, pressing against the back of her neck. She rolled over, eyes wide, but no one was there. Just her. Or so she hoped. Over the next few days, the knocks became more frequent. Sometimes at night, sometimes in the early morning. Always soft at first, then growing more insistent. Mia tried to ignore it, thinking maybe a neighbor was playing a prank. She even checked the peephole, the hallway, the staircase outside. Nothing. The knocks didn't make sense. The apartment was on the top floor. No one could reach her windows without climbing. And yet, the sound persisted. One evening, while unpacking a box of old books, Mia found a note tucked between the pages of a worn journal. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike, and it said one simple thing. "I see you." Her stomach sank. She thought it was a prank, maybe left by the previous tenant. But then the feeling returned. The pressure at the back of her neck, the whisper of movement in the shadows. That night, she left a recording app running on her phone. The knocks started around midnight. Soft at first, then sharp and rapid. And the whispering. She could barely make it out, but it was there. Soft, melodic, almost mocking. "I see you. I see you." Mia froze, heart in her throat, listening to her own fear captured on the device. She didn't sleep, not a wink. The next morning, she found scratches on the wall near her bed. Deep, angry lines, fresh. She hadn't touched them. No one had been in the apartment. She took photos, panicked, and even considered calling the police. But who would believe her? There was no intruder, no evidence beyond the marks, the knocks, the whispers. Days passed. The knocks grew louder, the whispers more insistent. And then, she started seeing him. Or her. A figure, dark and blurry, always at the edge of her vision. A man? A woman? It didn't matter. The presence was overwhelming. The figure appeared only for a moment, then vanished when she turned her head. Mia started staying awake for hours, watching, waiting. She tried to leave, to escape. Every time she stepped outside, the city seemed normal, indifferent. But the moment she returned, the feeling returned. That cold, watching presence, the soft knocks, the whispers just out of reach. She couldn't escape. Not really. One night, desperate for answers, she decided to confront it. "What do you want?" she shouted, voice trembling. Silence. Then, a soft laugh, the kind that makes your skin crawl. "You belong here," it whispered. The shadows stretched, growing thicker, darker. The temperature dropped. Mia could see her breath, even though the heater was on. She backed away, heart pounding. The laughter grew, echoing off the walls. Mia called a friend to come stay the night. They brought candles, tried to make it feel normal. But as soon as her friend fell asleep, Mia felt the pressure again. She turned slowly. There it was, the figure, standing at the foot of the bed, motionless, silent. Her friend didn't wake. The figure tilted its head. Then, with impossible speed, it vanished. A whisper lingered in the air. "You can't leave." Terrified, Mia researched the apartment's history. Previous tenants had all left abruptly. One had moved out claiming the place was haunted. Another had been found unconscious on the floor, muttering about someone watching. Mia felt a shiver run down her spine. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't coincidence. This was something alive, something patient, something ancient. She decided to record video the next night. The camera caught nothing for hours, until a faint shadow crossed the room. Then, a hand appeared briefly on the window. Mia's blood ran cold. She had no idea how it got there. The knock started again, in sync with the figure's movements. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught in her throat. Eventually, she realized something horrifying. It wasn't just haunting her. It was learning her routines, her habits, waiting for the right moment. The apartment itself seemed complicit, creaking and groaning in agreement with the presence. Mia felt trapped in a puzzle she couldn't solve, in a story with no end. She stayed in the apartment for months, convincing herself she could live alongside it. But it escalated. Mirrors cracked, lights flickered violently, doors slammed on their own. She would come home from work to find messages scratched into the walls. "I see you. You can't hide. Soon." Mia realized with a sinking horror that this wasn't a ghost playing games. It was a predator. Patient, methodical, omnipresent. Then came the night she couldn't ignore it anymore. She awoke to find herself paralyzed, unable to move. A shadow crouched over her, stretching impossibly high, features indistinct but terrifying. Its breath was icy. She heard the whispers in her ears, louder than ever. "You belong to me. You can't leave." Then a weight pressed onto her chest, suffocating, like the darkness itself had become solid. She thought she was going to die. Mia blacked out. When she woke, it was dawn. The apartment was quiet, deceptively normal. No scratches, no shadow, no whispers. But she knew better. She could feel the presence in the air, like static before a storm. Her friend was gone, inexplicably vanished, leaving behind a single, trembling note. "Leave. Run." Mia packed her things immediately. She left the apartment and never returned. She didn't tell anyone the full story. Who would believe her? But sometimes, when she's alone at night, she swears she can feel the presence lurking in corners, watching, waiting. And if she dares to move into a new place, she double-checks every window, every door, every shadow. Some say it's just an old building, settling, making noises in the night. Some say her mind played tricks on her, but Mia knows the truth. Whatever haunted that apartment wasn't bound by walls, by doors, by locks. It's patient, it's intelligent, and it never forgets. The night was unnaturally still. No wind, no cars. Nothing but the faint hum of the streetlights outside. Lucas was alone in the cabin he had rented deep in the woods, a place far from the city, far from people. He wanted peace, solitude, an escape from the chaos of his life. What he got instead was something that would haunt him forever. It started with a sound. At first, he thought it was an animal, a deer maybe, or a raccoon rummaging through leaves. But it wasn't natural. The sound was deliberate. Step, 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 moving closer to the cabin. Lucas froze, gripping the flashlight. His breath caught in his throat. He told himself it was nothing. He had seen too many horror movies. His mind was playing tricks. But then the knocking began. Light taps at first, almost polite, as if whoever or whatever was outside was testing him. Tap, tap, tap. Louder now. The cabin's wooden walls creaked under the weight of the sound. Lucas called out, "Hello? Who's there?" Only the wind answered. He went to the window. The woods were dark, shadows stretching impossibly between the trees. Nothing moved. But he could feel it, something watching him. Something patient, waiting for the perfect moment. The first night passed with little sleep. Every crack, every rustle made his skin crawl. He thought he saw shapes in the shadows, twisted figures disappearing when he blinked. His imagination? Maybe. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave. By the second night, the sounds escalated. Knocks turned into bangs, branches scraped the cabin walls, footsteps circled the building. Lucas tried to stay rational. He set traps, placed cameras, even shone lights into the darkness. Nothing. And yet, when he checked, the cameras showed movement. Shapes darting just out of view, blurs that disappeared when he approached. It wasn't just the noises anymore. He started seeing things. Footprints in the dirt around the cabin, too large to be an animal. Broken branches, fresh scratches on the wooden siding. Signs of someone, or something, prowling in silence, just beyond the reach of light. One night, desperate, he tried to confront it. He grabbed a flashlight and a hunting knife, walking into the woods, heart hammering. "I know you're there! Show yourself!" he shouted. The forest swallowed his voice. Then, from the darkness, a whisper. "You can't leave." It was soft, almost seductive, and it made his blood run cold. Lucas turned, but nothing. Just shadows. Just the trees. He ran back to the cabin, doors locked, windows barred, shaking. The feeling of being watched intensified. Every night it pressed closer, until he couldn't sleep. Every creak, every whisper, every knock became unbearable. He tried leaving, packed his car, ready to escape at first light. But the moment he drove down the winding road, something in the forest moved with him. A shadow in the rearview mirror, shapes darting between trees, branches scraping the car. The feeling of being followed, of being hunted, was suffocating. He drove faster. The woods seemed endless, twisting, warping around him. Returning to the cabin, Lucas realized he was trapped in a loop. Every path out of the forest led him back. Every attempt to escape failed. It was as if the woods themselves were alive, guiding him, corralling him, making him feel powerless. Then came the night he saw it. A figure, tall, impossibly thin, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, standing at the edge of the clearing. No face, just a black void where features should be. It watched him, waiting. The sound of its footsteps didn't match the sound of the forest. They were deliberate, controlled, echoing in ways that didn't make sense. Lucas froze. His hands shook. He whispered, "Who? What are you?" No answer. Just that same chilling whisper. "You belong here." The figure tilted its head, impossible angles, and vanished into the shadows. Sleep became impossible. He started hearing voices, faint at first, overlapping with the wind, growing louder each night. "Stay. You belong here. You can't leave." The voices mimicked his own thoughts, his own fears, echoing them back to him. Every attempt to leave, every plan to escape was thwarted by fear, by the forest, by the unseen entity. Mia, a friend who had once stayed in the cabin with him for a night, tried to help. She didn't last long. The second she entered, she felt the same oppressive presence. She described it as a weight pressing down on your chest, like the air itself is alive and hates you. She left, swearing never to return. Lucas stayed. He couldn't leave. The cabin began to change. Shadows pooled in corners, thicker than darkness should allow. The walls creaked unnaturally, groaning like a living thing. Objects moved slightly when he wasn't looking. Lights flickered, at first subtle, then violently. Each night, the presence grew stronger, the whispers louder, the shadows more tangible. He found old newspaper clippings buried under the floorboards, missing persons from decades ago, all last seen near the cabin, all presumed lost to the forest. The realization hit him like a hammer. This was not just a haunted place. This was a trap, a predator, a sentient darkness that fed on fear and despair. One night, it escalated. Lucas woke to find the figure in his room, standing silently at the foot of his bed. The temperature dropped. His breath fogged the air. The figure moved closer, impossibly fast. The whispers became a roar in his ears. "You can't leave. You belong here." He tried to scream, but no sound emerged. In desperation, Lucas tried reasoning. "I don't belong here. Let me go!" The figure paused, tilted its head, and the whisper softened, mocking. "You will stay." His body trembled. Every muscle refused to obey him. Paralysis gripped him. The figure reached forward, and a cold, inhuman hand touched his shoulder. It was like ice through his bones, freezing him from the inside out. Days, maybe weeks passed. He couldn't tell. Time had no meaning in the forest. When he woke, the cabin was silent. The shadows had withdrawn, leaving only an unnatural stillness. The front door was open. The car keys sat on the table. Escape was possible, finally. He ran. He drove, faster than he had ever driven. The forest seemed to recede, the oppressive weight lifting slightly. He reached the highway. Civilization. Light. Noise. He thought he was free, but freedom was an illusion. That night, in his new apartment in the city, Lucas felt it again. A shadow in the corner of his room. A whisper through the crack under the door. "You belong here." The forest hadn't let him go. It had followed him. It didn't care about distance, about walls, about safety. It was patient, eternal. Lucas never spoke about the cabin publicly. People would call him paranoid, overreacting, imagining things. But he knew the truth. The entity from the woods wasn't bound by geography. It wasn't bound by logic. It thrived on fear, on isolation, on the human need to believe you are alone when you are not. And sometimes, when Lucas closes his eyes at night, he swears he can hear the faintest footsteps circling his apartment, tapping against the walls, whispering in a voice that chills his blood. You belong here. You belong to us. He never returns to the forest. And yet, deep in the night, every shadow, every flicker of movement, every whisper of wind reminds him that escape was never truly possible. The forest, the entity, the darkness, they are patient. And one day, they will claim him fully. It started with a message. Just a single text on Emma's phone. We're watching you. At first, she laughed. A prank, maybe. Her friends messing around. She had been stressed, working late nights, and her imagination was already on edge. But then the second message came. You can't hide. Emma lived alone in a small apartment in the city. She prided herself on her independence, her careful routines, her sense that she was in control. But suddenly, everything felt off. Shadows seemed to linger too long in the corners of her apartment. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like whispers. Her front door lock clicked at odd times, though no one had come in. The third message arrived at midnight. Stop looking behind you. That's when fear took hold. Emma's heart raced. She checked every door, every window. Nothing. Yet the feeling persisted, heavy and suffocating, as though someone was moving silently, just outside her vision, just beyond her hearing. For the first few nights, Emma tried to ignore it. She told herself rational things. Her phone was hacked. Maybe someone online was playing a cruel joke. Perhaps stress was distorting reality. But rationality didn't help. She started noticing small things that couldn't be explained. Her keys weren't where she left them. Notes she hadn't written appeared on her desk. The smell of cigarette smoke, though she didn't smoke, wafted through the apartment at odd times. The sense of being watched intensified. Every time she turned a corner, she swore she saw movement in the shadows. She started leaving lights on, trying to keep the darkness at bay, but the shadows seemed to adapt. One evening, she glanced at her bedroom mirror and froze. Reflected in the glass was a figure standing behind her. Tall, indistinct, featureless, its presence filling the room with cold. She spun around. Nothing. Just her empty apartment. Emma called the police. They came, took her statement, checked her locks, reassured her. But when she returned home, the messages had resumed. They never leave. Sleep became impossible. Every creak, every distant footstep, every hum of electricity felt like a signal, a warning. She started talking to herself to stay grounded. It's just nerves. You're imagining things, she whispered in the dark. But even as she said it, she felt the oppressive gaze of the unknown. She installed cameras, motion sensors, alarms. She even changed her locks multiple times, but the intrusions continued. The messages arrived faster, more threatening. You cannot run. We are inside. And sometimes she could swear she heard soft breathing from the shadows, too close to be outside her apartment. Desperate, Emma reached out to her friends. She thought that if someone stayed with her, if she wasn't alone, maybe the presence would vanish. But the first friend who stayed a night left pale, muttering about shadows that moved on their own, whispers and voices that sounded like them, but weren't. The second friend refused to come back. One evening, while reviewing her security footage, Emma noticed something terrifying. In the corner of every frame, always at the edge of the lens, a shadow lingered. It didn't have a clear form, but it moved deliberately, always keeping her in sight. Sometimes it seemed to vanish, then reappear in a place she couldn't possibly reach in the time between frames. Emma began to document everything obsessively: timestamps, patterns, sequences. She tried to find logic, a reason, an explanation, but none existed. The entity, whatever it was, didn't follow normal rules. It was patient, intelligent, and invisible to anyone but her. By the third week, her apartment became unlivable. The shadows stretched further. The messages escalated. You belong to us. We are patient. We are everywhere. Emma started feeling the presence when she left the apartment. Walking to the grocery store, she sensed it just behind her. Driving home, it followed her, always on the edge of her vision. She tried looking directly at it. The moment she did, the whispers intensified, a voice in her mind saying, "Stop looking. You will regret it." Emma's friends began to notice her decline. She lost weight, her hair was messy, her eyes hollow. She stopped answering calls and texts. The outside world seemed distant, irrelevant. Her obsession with documenting the events consumed her. She started recording herself, hoping to catch evidence, hoping to find a pattern, hoping to prove she wasn't crazy. One night, the shadow became bold. Emma was lying in bed when the lights went out. Absolute darkness. And then she felt it. A presence pressing against her chest, weightless yet immovable. She tried to scream. Her voice failed. The shadows gathered in the corners of the room, coalescing into a shape that hovered above her. Featureless. Blacker than night itself. The whispers were no longer distant. They were inside her head, mocking, insidious, relentless. You belong to us. You cannot leave. Panic seized her. She struggled, clawed at her blankets, tried to reach her phone. The shadow hovered, watching, waiting. She felt a coldness that wasn't just temperature. It was a freezing of her very soul. Hours passed, though she had no sense of time. When she finally collapsed from exhaustion, the shadow retreated, leaving her trembling in the dark. Morning brought no relief. Her apartment appeared normal, no signs of forced entry, no strange movements. But Emma knew. The presence never left. She could feel it watching, waiting, learning. Every reflective surface became a potential doorway for the entity to observe her. Mirrors, windows, even the screen of her phone. Every glance brought the fear closer, until she felt she was constantly under surveillance, constantly trapped. Emma attempted one last solution, leaving the city entirely. Packing her things, abandoning her apartment, driving hours away. Maybe distance could break the connection. Maybe she could escape. But the feeling of being followed persisted. On the highway, in rest stops, in motels, she always felt eyes on her. A weight at the edge of perception, a whisper brushing her mind. You cannot leave. The culmination came unexpectedly. One night, alone in a motel room miles from the city, Emma woke to a soft tapping at the window. She froze, remembering that the room was on the third floor, overlooking nothing but trees and dark parking lots. Slowly, a figure appeared, just outside the glass. Featureless, shadowed, watching. She screamed. The tap turned into pounding. Her phone died instantly. Every door she locked, every window she barred. Useless. The entity was patient, precise, unstoppable. Emma fled into the night, running blindly into the parking lot. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to escape the building, escape the city, escape reality itself. She tripped, fell, scraped her hands, but continued. Behind her, the pounding followed, echoing, relentless. Every shadow became a potential threat, every sound a warning. Eventually, she collapsed in exhaustion, somewhere unknown, and realized the terrifying truth. There was no escape. The presence had followed her, integrated into her life, her reality. It didn't care about walls, locks, doors, or distance. It didn't need her to be alone. It thrived on fear, on paranoia, on the constant awareness that she was watched. Months later, Emma's apartment was rented to someone new. The neighbors noticed strange lights flickering at odd hours. Sometimes they heard whispering through the walls. And occasionally, if they looked closely at the security footage left behind by the previous tenant, they saw something in the shadows. Something that didn't belong. A shape, always watching, patient, waiting. Emma disappeared entirely, leaving no trace behind. Friends and family assumed she ran away, vanished into the chaos of her own mind. But those who knew the apartment, and the whispers, knew better. They knew that some presences don't just haunt a place, they haunt people. They follow, they wait, and they never, ever leave. To this day, if you wander the city late at night, in the apartment complexes or the narrow alleyways, you might feel it. A subtle pressure behind your eyes, a whisper in the air, a sense that you are being observed. Some say it's imagination, others know better. Because for Emma, and maybe now for you, the shadows are patient, intelligent, and eternal. And they always find their next victim. It began with the sound of laughter. Not the friendly kind, not the warmth of a shared joke. This was hollow, high-pitched, echoing through the empty corridors of the abandoned hospital. It was 2 a.m., and Mark and his friends had dared each other to explore the old facility. Stories said it was haunted, that patients had died under mysterious circumstances, and that some never truly left. Mark thought it was perfect for a thrill, a challenge, a story to post online. The hospital loomed like a corpse frozen in time. Broken windows, peeling paint, and rusted metal gates gave it the look of a place forgotten by the world, and perhaps remembered by something else. Inside, the air smelled of decay, dampness, and something metallic, faint but unmistakable. Mark clicked on his flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness, illuminating graffiti-strewn walls and long-forgotten wheelchairs. "Guys, come on," he whispered. "It's just an old hospital. No ghosts, no monsters." But his voice faltered slightly. His friends laughed, but even their laughter sounded off, bouncing unevenly off the walls. They moved in pairs, exploring room by room. At first, everything seemed normal, just dusty corridors and the remnants of medical equipment. But then the subtle signs appeared. A chair slightly shifted from where they left it. A door that wasn't fully closed when they had passed. Footsteps that didn't match their own. "Probably rats," one friend said, but the sound of scuttling grew too large, too deliberate. It wasn't random. It followed them. The first major scare came in the pediatric ward. Rows of tiny beds lined the walls, mattresses yellowed and torn. A music box sat on a shelf, inexplicably playing a slow, warped lullaby. Mark's flashlight flickered as the melody grew louder, though no one had wound it up. And then, the laughter returned, closer, sharper. A shadow flitted across the far wall. "Did you see that?" Mark hissed. His friends froze. Nothing remained but the echoing laugh, now joined by whispers in a language none of them understood. As they advanced cautiously, the building seemed to react. Doors slammed shut behind them. Hallways stretched longer than physically possible. The further they went, the more the hospital transformed, no longer just old and abandoned, but alive, aware. The lights in the old operating theater flickered. Mark's flashlight illuminated a shape on the surgical table, a figure covered in rags, head twitching unnaturally. He blinked. Gone. But the smell of antiseptic mixed with something rotting lingered. They tried to leave. Every exit was blocked. Windows sealed shut as if the building had grown. Doors that had once led to hallways now opened into darkness that seemed bottomless. Panic started to creep in. Mark's hands shook as he held the flashlight, scanning the walls for any clue, any way out. Then the whispers became voices, calling their names. Mark! Mark! The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. His friends clung together, but the voices separated them, guiding them down different corridors. Mark ran, heart hammering, until he reached a room filled with mirrors. He froze. His reflection moved slightly out of sync, smiling when he didn't. Something tapped him on the shoulder. He spun around. Nothing. But in the mirror, a figure loomed behind him, taller than any human should be, faceless, its dark presence filling the glass. Mark backed away slowly. The reflection didn't mimic him. It acted on its own, reaching toward him with elongated fingers. He heard screaming. Not his own. One of his friends had vanished, leaving behind a puddle of shadow that crawled along the floor like liquid smoke. Another appeared, eyes wide, whispering, "It wants us. It's playing." Before Mark could respond, the floor beneath them groaned. Rusted metal beams bent and twisted, walls closing in. The hospital was no longer a building. It was a trap. Mark ran into the chapel, a room with broken stained glass and pews covered in dust. He fell to his knees, gasping, the smell of decayed incense filling his lungs. Shadows pooled at the corners, forming shapes that resembled the patients rumored to have died here. They whispered secrets he didn't understand, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. One shadow separated from the rest, gliding toward him. It spoke, not words, but thoughts, invasive, intimate, knowing every fear he had ever tried to hide. You wanted a thrill. You wanted to play. Now we play with you. Mark screamed, and the sound seemed to fuel the entity, making it stronger, more tangible. He tried to fight back. He threw chairs, smashed mirrors, even tried to run out the doors, but every action only fed the hospital's will. Corridors looped endlessly. Each corner he turned revealed the same figure, closer than before. The shadows whispered, laughed, taunted, and sometimes just watched, patient and eternal. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. Time seemed meaningless. Mark found himself back in the pediatric ward, the music box playing its warped lullaby once more. The beds were no longer empty. Figures crouched on the mattresses, twisted forms of children, faceless yet moving like marionettes. The air grew colder. His breath formed clouds, though no heater had been running for decades. One friend emerged from the shadows, eyes completely black, mouth twisted into a grin that wasn't human. Mark tried to reach out, but the friend vanished into smoke, leaving only a whisper, "You belong here now." Desperation overtook him. Mark remembered the rumors he had ignored, that the hospital had a history of experimenting with patients in secret, that some treatments weren't just unethical, they were supernatural, that some spirits had never left, that some visitors never returned. He realized then that they were not dealing with ghosts. They were dealing with something far older, something alive in the walls, feeding off fear and disbelief. He hid in the storage room, crawling among rusted gurneys and broken medical instruments. The laughter and whispers grew louder outside, circling, hunting. He could see the shadows pressing against the walls like liquid darkness, their shapes stretching impossibly. He held his flashlight above his head, praying the batteries wouldn't die, praying that daylight would arrive, praying that the hospital's hunger might be satiated by someone else. And then he heard the tapping. Not at a door, not at a window, but inside his skull. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed through his mind, a rhythm that seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. Panic surged. He banged his head against the wall, screaming, trying to drown out the sound. But it only grew louder. Suddenly, silence. Deafening, oppressive silence. Mark dared to breathe. The storage room door creaked open on its own. A hand, black, featureless, impossibly long, slid through the crack. The whispers returned, faster, more insistent. It's time. He bolted, running blindly through corridors that shifted around him. The exit he thought he knew was gone. Windows revealed endless night, doors opened into walls, and shadows chased relentlessly. Every turn led to more horror. Paintings that bled, wheelchairs that moved by themselves, figures staring silently from darkened corners. Finally, he reached what looked like the main entrance. The door swung open with ease. Cold night air greeted him, but the city beyond was distorted, unfamiliar. Buildings twisted unnaturally. Streetlights flickered in a pattern that made no sense. The hospital wasn't just a building. It had become a portal, a threshold to something beyond normal reality. He ran into the streets, heart racing, lungs burning. The shadows followed, not in physical form, but in perception. Every movement in the corner of his eye, every faint reflection, every flicker of light reminded him that he was still being watched, still being hunted. Mark escaped the hospital physically, but not mentally. He could feel it following him, threading through his thoughts, whispering in quiet moments, twisting reality. The building remained, looming silently in the distance, waiting, patient, aware. And he knew, deep in his bones, that the hospital would claim him again one day. Or someone else. Stories of the abandoned hospital circulated online. Urban explorers spoke of strange phenomena, lights flickering at odd hours, equipment moving on its own. But those who went inside rarely returned with complete stories, only fragments of terror and fear. Some said the hospital chose who to let leave, who to keep. Some said it fed on curiosity, on bravado, on disbelief. Mark never returned. Friends stopped answering his calls. His social media went silent. Occasionally, his online accounts posted strange messages, nonsensical phrases typed out slowly, methodically, as if by unseen hands. And every night, somewhere, someone hears that same hollow laughter echoing through abandoned corridors, inviting, taunting, waiting. The hospital is patient. It has time. And it knows you will come. It started with a knock at the window. Not a soft tap, not a polite signal, but a deliberate, sharp rapping that echoed through the empty cabin. Lisa froze mid-step, her heart skipping. She was alone. She had been alone for hours, maybe days. Time felt strange out here in the woods. But the knock came again, louder this time, insistent. She told herself it was a branch, a raccoon, something harmless. Her logical mind clung to rational explanations, but the pit in her stomach told her otherwise. She tried to ignore it, pouring herself a cup of instant coffee, listening to the wind howl outside, the trees groaning like the echoes of old ghosts. Lisa had come to the cabin to escape. Work, city life, the constant hum of human chaos, it all pressed down on her. The cabin, nestled deep in a remote forest, was her sanctuary. No electricity, no internet, just her, a few books, and the sound of silence. Or so she thought. The first sign that something was off wasn't the knock. It was the footprints. She saw them in the dust near the porch, small, oddly human but not quite right. They didn't belong to her boots. They were bare, tiny, and led away into the dense undergrowth. She crouched, tracing the path with her finger. Her pulse quickened. Who could possibly be here? Then came the whispers. Faint, almost imperceptible at first, like the rustling of leaves. But they weren't outside. They were inside. Lisa froze, her hand trembling over the mug. The voice was soft, almost childlike, murmuring her name. Lisa. Lisa. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but she was trapped. The forest around the cabin had shifted. Paths she had walked countless times twisted unnaturally. The trees seemed closer, the shadows longer. She bolted to the front door, tried the lock, solid. She slammed her shoulder into it. Solid. Panic surged, adrenaline flooding her veins. She turned back into the cabin. The whispers grew louder, and shadows stretched across the walls like living fingers. The fire she had started in the small wood stove flickered and danced, throwing grotesque shapes that weren't quite her imagination. And then she saw it. A figure at the corner of the room, crouched low, head cocked unnaturally, staring at her. It wasn't a person, not entirely. Its limbs were too long, too thin. Its eyes reflected the firelight in a way that seemed wrong, black, endless, absorbing. Lisa's voice caught in her throat. She backed into the corner, her mug crashing to the floor, coffee spilling, steaming over the worn floorboards. "Who's there?" she shouted, though she already knew the answer. The figure tilted its head. The whispering stopped. Silence pressed down, thick and suffocating. Then, a laugh. High-pitched, hollow, like wind through dead trees. Lisa ran to the back of the cabin, hoping for a hidden exit, a trapdoor, anything. Her foot caught on a loose board, sending her sprawling. She hit the floor hard, breathless, and when she looked up, the figure was closer. It wasn't running, it was gliding, impossibly fast, silently, effortlessly. The forest outside seemed to breathe. Trees twisted and shifted in the corner of her vision, shadows forming faces that leered, twisted mouths opening in silent screams. The air grew colder. Her breath misted in front of her. The whispers returned, faster now, overlapping. She couldn't understand the words, but she understood the intent. Hunger, malice, play. Lisa stumbled into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. She locked it, pressed her body against it, listening. The knocks resumed, heavy now, deliberate, like fists on old wood. A shadow passed beneath the crack at the bottom. Something slid under the door, something warm, something wet. Her mind raced. Stories she had laughed at during campfire nights flooded back. Tales of creatures that haunted the woods, spirits that lured people away. Something that mimicked the familiar but was inherently wrong. And now she realized with a chilling clarity she was not in a story. She was the story. The figure outside the door spoke this time, its voice human but warped, each word stretching unnaturally. "You shouldn't be here, Lisa." It paused, as if savoring her fear. "But now, you are." Lisa backed away, but the door wouldn't give. The window was blocked by thick branches that hadn't been there earlier. The shadows pressed against her, reaching, stretching through cracks and seams, filling the room with a darkness that wasn't absence of light, but presence itself. Desperate, she remembered the old supply closet. Maybe a weapon? Maybe something to protect herself? She ran, the wooden floorboards creaking underfoot, her breath ragged. As she opened the closet door, a hand, slender, impossibly pale, shot out from the darkness and grabbed her wrist. The touch burned, cold yet searing, as if ice and fire collided. Lisa screamed, kicking, pulling, but it held firm. She tore her arm free, stumbling back. The closet was empty, or so it seemed. The smell hit her first, earthy, metallic, like soil and rust. Then she saw the shadows moving, coalescing into forms, human-shaped but wrong, faces twisted in eternal torment. They whispered, mocking her, drawing her into the nightmare. Panic drove her out of the cabin, into the forest. But the forest was no longer normal. Trees bent toward her, roots twisting like serpents, branches snapping as she ran. The ground shifted beneath her feet. Every step she took seemed to bring her back to the cabin, as if the forest itself were a labyrinth with no exit. She tripped over something. A figure? A tree? Hard to tell in the darkness. She fell face first into the dirt, and when she raised her head, she saw a circle of figures surrounding her. Small, emaciated, pale. Their eyes were empty hollows. They didn't move like humans. They moved like puppets, jerky, unnatural. Their mouths opened in unison, a silent scream that vibrated in her skull. Lisa scrambled backward, tripping over roots, feeling the forest close in. She could hear whispers from the trees themselves, words that were not words, shapes forming in the shadows forming into shapes that should not exist. The forest was alive, watching, patient, waiting. And it wanted her. She stumbled into a clearing and saw the cabin in the distance, lights flickering in a way that didn't belong. The glow was not warm, not inviting. It was a lure, a beacon, a trap. From the darkness, the figures emerged, gliding silently, surrounding her. She ran, but the forest conspired against her, guiding her back, forcing her into its grip. The whispers became laughter again, echoing in her mind. The figures reached closer, their shadows stretching unnaturally long, warping reality. Lisa screamed, a sound lost in the vast, dark expanse of the forest. Her arms flailed, but her feet were rooted in place. She could feel the hands, cold, grasping, pulling. Then, silence. The world snapped into stillness. The figures were gone. The forest returned to its quiet, eerie calm. Lisa lay on the ground, panting, shaking. The cabin sat in the distance, still, quiet, almost innocuous in the moonlight. She told herself it was a trick, a hallucination, sleep deprivation, whatever rational explanation she could cling to. She made it back to her car at dawn, keys trembling in her hands. But the experience followed her. Shadows in the corners of rooms, whispers when the house was empty, a tapping at the window at night. She never returned to the woods. Friends stopped inviting her, thinking she had imagined it. But she knew. She had seen it, felt it. It had followed her. Some nights, when the wind is right, Lisa swears she hears that first knock at the window. Sharp, deliberate, insistent. And she remembers, it is not over. Not yet. It never truly is. The forest is patient. And it waits. It began with a sound that didn't belong. A slow, dragging thump from the attic above. Mara had been alone in her apartment for hours, unpacking boxes after a cross-country move. She told herself it was the old building settling, the pipes, anything but the idea that someone, or something, was moving above her head. The first thump came again, louder this time, deliberate. It wasn't random. It had rhythm, like someone pacing, thinking, waiting. Mara froze mid-step, the tape she held snapping sharply as she dropped it. Her cat, Whiskers, bolted under the couch, ears flat, tail puffed like a bottle brush. She called out, voice trembling. "Hello? Anyone up there?" Silence. Just the faint creak of the floorboards above, and then a whispered sound. So soft she almost didn't hear it. Almost. Mara, her name. Whispered. Drawn out. Cold. Hollow. She spun toward the stairs, heart hammering. No one should be here. The locks were secure. The landlord had mentioned nothing about prior tenants leaving anything behind. And yet, the sound persisted. Mara grabbed a flashlight, shining it up toward the attic hatch. The beam trembled in her hands. The hatch was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness leaking into her otherwise cozy apartment. Her stomach turned. She should call someone. She should leave. But curiosity, that dangerous human trait, rooted her feet. Step by step, she climbed the ladder. The wood groaned under her weight. Each step sounded like a gunshot in the silent apartment. When she reached the top, she peered into the attic. Dust motes floated in the beam of her flashlight. Boxes stacked haphazardly, forgotten furniture, the smell of old wood and mothballs. Nothing. Just nothing. Then came the sound again. Behind her. Slow. Dragging. Something metallic scraping against the floor. She whirled around. Nothing. Just shadows dancing in the corners. Her heart thumped, erratic, a wild drum in her chest. She took a deep breath and decided to explore. The attic was bigger than she expected. Wooden beams crisscrossed the ceiling, boxes lined the walls, and in the far corner, a small door. She hadn't noticed it before. It was narrow, almost like a crawl space, and it radiated a chill that made her skin prickle. A whisper brushed past her ear. "Mara." She froze. Whiskers hissed from the bottom of the ladder. The flashlight flickered. For a moment, darkness swallowed the attic, and when the beam returned, the door was open. It hadn't been open before. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but another part, the part she hated admitting, was drawn forward, compelled. She stepped closer. Peering inside, the space seemed empty, until she saw the eyes. Small, black, shining, watching. And then a voice, this time more than a whisper, solid, firm. "I've been waiting." Mara stumbled back, heart racing. She could feel the air thicken, the shadows stretching unnaturally along the rafters. The attic seemed to breathe, the walls pulsing like a living organism. The dragging sound returned, coming closer, circling. She spun toward the ladder, but the way she had climbed felt different, longer, twisted. The attic seemed to have expanded, impossibly large. She tried to call for help. Her phone buzzed, static at first, then silence. The shadows crept along the floorboards, twisting, crawling. One of them took a humanoid shape, bending at impossible angles, its limbs long, thin, jointed wrong. It reached for her with hands that ended in sharp, metallic points. Mara screamed and ran toward the door. It slammed shut in her face. The whispers became voices, overlapping, urgent, mocking. They echoed off the wooden beams. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't see. You shouldn't know." In a corner of the attic, a trunk rattled violently. Dust flew into the air, thick and choking. Mara's flashlight caught a glimpse of movement inside. Something shifting, alive, not bound by the rules of the natural world. She stumbled backward, crashing into a stack of crates. One toppled over, spilling contents across the floor. Old dolls, broken toys, all staring with blank eyes, some with their heads tilted at unnatural angles. The floorboards beneath her cracked. She froze. The air smelled of decay, of something rotten, a smell that clung to her clothes and hair. And then she saw it. A shadow, separate from the others, darker than darkness itself, moving toward her. It didn't walk, it glided, effortlessly, ignoring the cracks and obstacles in its path. She tried the ladder again. It wasn't there. The way back had vanished. The attic seemed endless, stretching into infinity. Each step she took echoed, repeating infinitely, disorienting. The shadows closed in. She could hear their breath, cold and wet, brushing her skin, their whispers filling her ears, overwhelming her senses. A small metallic sound drew her attention. She turned. A music box, lying on the floor, had opened on its own. The tune played, slow, distorted, and haunting. With each note, the shadows twisted more violently, forming grotesque shapes, mocking her, laughing at her terror. Mara backed against a wall. The air grew colder, her breath forming clouds in front of her face. The figures reached closer, some stretching impossibly tall, others crawling along the beams like spiders. The whispers became screams, deafening in their intensity, shaking the wooden frame of the attic. She saw a figure separate itself from the shadows, humanoid, but faceless. It lifted a hand, pointing directly at her. Her vision blurred. The floor beneath her warped. For a heartbeat, she was weightless, suspended in the void between reality and nightmare. Then she landed, hard. Pain shot through her ankle. She crawled toward the far wall, hands scraping against rough wood. The faceless figure was gone, but the shadows remained, pressing against her from all sides. She could feel them in her hair, on her skin, inside her mind. In desperation, she grabbed a small hammer from a tool rack, swinging wildly at the shadows. Her hands passed through them as if striking smoke. The air hissed and burned around her. The whispers became a chant. Leave, or stay forever. Through the chaos, she noticed a faint glow at the far end of the attic. A hatch, possibly her way out. She crawled, dragging her injured ankle, ignoring the shadows that clawed at her legs. Each movement was agony, but the glow promised escape. As she reached the hatch, a hand shot from the darkness, grabbing her shoulder. Cold, solid, crushing. She screamed, the sound raw, piercing. She twisted violently, wrenching free, and flung herself through the opening. Sunlight. Real sunlight. She hit the ground outside, dirt and leaves covering her. Gasping, tears streaking her face, she looked back. The building was silent. No thumps, no shadows, no whispers. Just an ordinary apartment, ordinary bricks, ordinary windows. She ran. Without looking back, she ran, never stopping until the trees thinned and the road appeared. She didn't notice the blood, the scratches, the dirt covering her clothes. She didn't notice that Whiskers was nowhere to be seen, vanished without a trace. Weeks later, friends tried to convince her to return, to retrieve her cat, to pack her belongings. Mara couldn't. She couldn't go near that apartment. Even photos she had taken showed anomalies, shadows, subtle distortions, faces appearing briefly where none existed. She moved, far away. New city, new apartment. But sometimes, at night, When the wind is right, she hears the faint dragging of steps above her ceiling, the slow, deliberate thump that started it all, the whispers that call her name. And in the corner of her mind, she knows the truth. Some doors, once opened, never close. Some shadows, once seen, never leave. Mara survived, but a part of her never left the attic, waiting, watching, patient. It started with a message. One short, almost innocent-looking text on Emma's phone. "I know where you are." She froze, thumb hovering over the screen. Her apartment was locked, alarm set, windows secured. Nothing should have been able to reach her. Yet the message had come. From who? From what? Her phone buzzed again. "Don't ignore me." Emma's hands shook. She called her best friend, Lily. No answer. Just a voicemail. "I can't talk right now. Call you later." She left it, heart racing, and checked the door. Locked. Bolts in place. Nothing unusual. And yet, the air felt wrong. Heavy, almost viscous, pressing down on her chest. That night, sleep didn't come. Every creak of the apartment sounded amplified, every shadow stretching longer than it should. She told herself it was paranoia, stress, maybe the leftover anxiety from the news she'd watched earlier. Serial killers, missing persons, the usual headlines that clawed at your imagination. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps, deliberate, coming from the front door. Her stomach dropped. She didn't answer. The knocking continued, relentless, echoing off the walls. Tap, tap, tap. Her phone buzzed again. "I'm closer than you think." Emma's hands flew to her ears, but the sound of whispering followed her through the apartment, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. A low, sibilant voice repeating her name. "Emma. Emma." She grabbed a kitchen knife, holding it like a lifeline, and crept toward the living room window. Peering through the blinds, she saw nothing but the empty street, dimly lit by a flickering street lamp. No one. No car. Nothing. Then she noticed the reflection. In the glass, behind her, a shadow, hunched, still, watching. She spun around. Nothing. The apartment was empty. Yet the feeling persisted, a presence just beyond her sight, waiting. Her phone buzzed again, and this time the message made her blood run cold. "Look behind you." Emma's breath caught. Slowly, deliberately, she turned. The hallway behind her stretched longer than it should, bending at impossible angles, shadows pooling like dark water. At the far end, a figure emerged. Not fully human, not fully shadow. A warped silhouette with limbs that seemed too long, fingers scraping the floor with an unsettling sound. She screamed, backing toward the kitchen. The knife was shaking in her hands, sweat dripping down her face. The figure didn't move like a normal person. It glided, silent, relentless, following her every step. Emma remembered the spare bedroom. She bolted, slamming the door behind her. She tried to lock it, fumbling with the latch as the figure's presence pressed against the walls, the floor, the very air itself. The whispers returned, louder, urgent. "You can't hide. You can't run." Through the small window, she could see the street again. Empty. Safe. But the sense of being watched, of being hunted, was overwhelming. The shadow scraped along the door, trying to pry it open, its movements unnatural, inhuman. Emma realized her phone was still buzzing. She grabbed it, hoping for help. Another message. "I'm inside." Panic surged. She ran to the closet, yanking the door open, and crawled inside, shutting it as quietly as possible. The whispers were now right outside, almost touching the wood of the closet walls. She could feel the vibration of the voice, like a pulse in the floorboards. The minutes stretched. Hours, maybe. Time had lost its meaning. Then she heard it, a click, like a lock disengaging. Not the closet, the front door. Someone had entered. Her apartment was no longer her sanctuary. Every shadow became suspect, every sound a threat. She peeked from the closet. The silhouette moved through the living room, bending light and shadow in ways that should have been impossible. It paused at the coffee table, where her photo albums lay. One by one, the albums opened, pages flipping on their own, each picture distorted, faces morphing into shadows of themselves. A soft voice, almost childlike, emerged from the darkness. "Why won't you play with me?" Emma's stomach turned. This wasn't a human. This was something else, feeding off fear, drawn to her, persistent, intelligent. She tried to back away, but the floor seemed to twist beneath her, each step elongating the hallway, turning her escape into a labyrinth. Her phone buzzed again. "You can't hide, Emma. Not from me." She screamed, throwing it across the room. The screen shattered, but the messages continued, appearing on every reflective surface, mirrors, windows, even the shiny top of her toaster. The apartment was alive with the entity, warping reality around her. Emma ran to the bathroom, locking the door. She splashed water on her face, trying to ground herself. The shadows pressed against the walls outside, whispering, taunting. She realized the pattern. It didn't move randomly. It studied her, learning her habits, her fears, predicting her actions before she could act. A new sound pierced the apartment, the soft scuff of shoes on carpet. Not human shoes. The rhythm was wrong, uneven, dragging. The door handle rattled. In desperation, Emma grabbed the mirror, holding it in front of her. The reflection shimmered unnaturally. Through it, she saw the shadow fully for the first time. A tall, skeletal figure, limbs impossibly thin, eyes glowing faintly red. It wasn't coming for her body. It was reaching for her mind, for her essence. The whispers became screams, filling her head, drowning rational thought. She slammed the mirror against the floor. It shattered, but the glow lingered in the shards, floating in the air like fireflies of malice. The figure paused, tilting its head, almost curious. Then it advanced again, slow, deliberate, patient. Every instinct screamed to flee, but Emma realized there was nowhere to run. This wasn't about doors or locks. This was about presence. She had to break its hold on her, or it would consume her entirely. In a moment of clarity, she remembered the old legends she'd read online, stories of shadows and spirits, of fear feeding them, giving them life. She focused, drawing her attention away from panic, from dread, from every whisper that sought to drown her. She forced her mind into logic, into reality. The apartment was walls and floors and doors. The shadow was nothing but perception given form. A scream tore from her throat, not of fear, but of defiance. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if stung. The air lightened, the oppressive weight lifting. The figure hovered at the edge of the room, still present but weaker, uncertain. Emma ran, moving toward the front door. She flung it open, and sunlight flooded in, washing over her in a sensation of warmth she hadn't felt all night. The street was quiet, normal, mundane. No shadows, no whispers, no distorted hallways. She didn't look back. She ran down the street, every instinct screaming to keep moving. The entity hadn't followed her outside. Yet. But she knew it hadn't gone. Shadows didn't disappear. They waited. Patiently. They watched. They adapted. Weeks later, Emma moved again. Twice. 3 times. never staying in one place long enough for familiarity to give the shadows power. She never left a light off at night. Every reflective surface was covered. Mirrors, windows, even her phone, always face down. And yet, sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she could feel it, lurking at the edge of her consciousness. A whisper, soft, sibilant, drawing her attention, always just out of sight. "I'm still here, Emma." The shadows never fully leave. They wait for those who acknowledge them, who feel them, who fear them. And Emma learned the hard way. Some presences cannot be banished, only delayed. It was supposed to be the perfect weekend getaway. A cabin deep in the woods, far from city noise, far from phones, far from everything. Mia and her friends laughed as they drove down the winding dirt road, the tires crunching on gravel. They'd imagined cozy nights by the fire, ghost stories, maybe a little adventure. The sun dipped low as they arrived, casting long shadows across the clearing. The cabin was quaint, almost charming, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to whisper secrets to one another. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles, sharp and clean. They unpacked, lit a fire, and settled in. At first, everything was fine. The fire crackled, music played softly from a Bluetooth speaker, and the night felt like any other camping trip. But then, something shifted. It started with a sound. A soft scratching, almost imperceptible, coming from the edge of the clearing. Mia froze. Her friends laughed, thinking she was joking, but the noise persisted. Scrape, 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 like claws against bark. "Probably a raccoon," one friend said, but the tone lacked conviction. The sound didn't move away, it didn't wander, it waited. Hours passed. The laughter faded as the fire burned lower. Shadows from the flames stretched across the walls, dancing in ways that almost seemed sentient. Then the first door rattled. Softly at first, like the wind, but the trees were still. No wind tonight. Mia approached it cautiously. The handle didn't move. The sound stopped. She exhaled, telling herself it was nothing, just the cabin settling. But the unease had already planted itself, deep, like a seed in her chest. That night, she woke to a whisper. Not from her friends, who were asleep in the other room. Not from outside. It seemed to come from inside the cabin. "Get up." She jolted upright. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the fire through the window. She told herself she'd imagined it, that it was stress or too many horror movies. But then the whisper came again. Closer this time. Clearer. "Get up, Mia." Her heart pounded. She got out of bed, flashlight in hand. The beam swept across the room, landing on the old wooden floorboards. Something moved. No, someone. A figure crouched in the corner, so still it could have been carved from shadow. Mia's breath hitched. "Who's there?" she whispered. The figure didn't respond, just watched silently. The hair on the back of her neck prickled as it slowly rose to its full height. It was thin, unnaturally so, with limbs that bent at wrong angles. Its eyes reflected the flashlight like two tiny molten suns. She stumbled backward, crashing into a chair. The figure shifted, silent, deliberate, each step too quiet, too fluid to be human. Mia ran to the other's room. "Guys, wake up! Something's here!" But the room was empty. Beds untouched, clothes folded. She realized with horror that she'd been alone all along. The cabin had not been occupied by anyone else. The whispers followed her, soft, malicious, curling around her like smoke. Why did you come here? You shouldn't be here. Panic surged. She grabbed her phone. No signal, not even a bar. The woods outside seemed impossibly dense, almost pressing against the cabin walls. She tried the door, locked from the inside. She hadn't locked it, but now it wouldn't budge. Then came the scratching again, closer this time, against the windows, against the walls. The fire sputtered, shadows twisting violently. Mia's flashlight flickered and died. Darkness swallowed her. Something moved past her in the corner of the room. Fast. Wrong. Silent. She could feel it, smell it, sense it. And then she heard breathing. Not human breathing. Wet, heavy, rasping. Like a predator that had been starving for weeks. She backed into the bathroom, locking herself in. Cold tile pressed against her feet, the single bulb overhead flickering. Her breathing was loud, echoing, filling the tiny space. She tried to calm herself. Rational thought. Logic. Nothing. None of it worked here. Then she saw the mirror. The reflection wasn't hers. A face, elongated, twisted, eyes too large, stared back. It smiled. Not with lips, but with the corners of its mouth stretching unnaturally wide. Mia screamed, slamming herself against the door. The handle rattled violently. The creature outside hissed. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning. Every sound was amplified, every shadow a threat. She couldn't sleep, couldn't move, couldn't think. The cabin had become a cage, and the creature knew every inch of it. Finally, the fire died. The darkness became absolute. She could hear it moving, slithering almost, around the cabin. Then, silence. A whisper. You can't leave. Mia's courage faltered. She knew she couldn't fight this. There was no running, no hiding. The creature wasn't just physical, it was everywhere, a part of the air, the walls, the very essence of the cabin. But she had one idea, one desperate, foolish plan. She grabbed all the candles, the matches, and the flammable cleaner under the sink. If she burned the cabin, maybe she could destroy it, maybe destroy whatever had claimed it. Maybe. The creature watched. Mia could feel its presence pressing into her mind, cold, probing. She struck the match. Flame danced. She poured the liquid, ignited it. The cabin erupted. Fire consumed everything, light and shadow colliding in chaotic brilliance. Screaming, she ran out, stumbling into the woods. The creature followed, just at the edge of the firelight, a shape darker than darkness, unspeaking but malevolent. She ran, lungs burning, branches tearing at her face, every step a gamble. By the time she reached the road, the fire had spread, the cabin collapsing in on itself. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. A passing car took her away, headlights slicing through the dark, saving her from the forest. For now. Mia never returned. Authorities found the charred remains of the cabin, but no sign of the creature. Just the scorched earth, blackened timbers, and an eerie silence. Local legend quickly grew. Don't go to the woods at night. Don't approach abandoned cabins. Don't listen to whispers in the dark. Years later, Mia tried to rebuild a normal life. But at night, when the world was quiet, she could feel it. Just beyond sight, just at the corner of hearing. A presence waiting, patient, remembering her. Sometimes she'd wake to the faintest scratching at the window. Sometimes she'd swear a shadow moved where it shouldn't. She knew deep down that the creature never left. It wasn't just in the woods. It had marked her, And now it followed, waiting, watching, always whispering, "I will find you." Again, Mia learned the ultimate truth. Some horrors don't die. They don't disappear. They linger, patient as stone, relentless as night. And sometimes they wait until you're alone, confident, and unprepared. That's when they strike. Even years later, when Mia turned on every light, covered every mirror, double-checked every lock, she could feel it. Somewhere out there, the thing she had escaped that night was still alive, still hungry, still patient. And she knew, no matter how far she ran, the forest would always remember her, and she would never be free.